Hello everyone! If it's your first time here, then welcome. For a few months, I stopped trying to improve and instead just played for fun. But now, I'm planning on getting back, and I'm planning on improving. And for now, my goal is to reach 2200. Of course it's not my end goal, but it's a nice start. Here's the game. So it's me against mystery opponent. We shook hands and started playing. I played d4 and my mystery opponent played knight f6. I played c4 and my opponent played c5, forcing me to go d5. My opponent then played the Benko Gambit. The Benko Gambit is an opening I kept telling myself to study, but I never really did, so I was already pretty scared. I took the pawn on b5, and my opponent offered me another pawn. Me, being the greedy fat ass that I am, took the pawn on a6, and my opponent took back with their bishop. From the little knowledge I had about the Benko Gambit, I think that the goal of the black pieces is to leave my king stranded on the center, and have the A and B files open for their rooks to attack. So I played g3, with hopes of playing bishop g2, knight f3, then castling, keeping my king safe. My opponent played g6, with plans of having their bishop on g7, applying pressure on my queen side. I moved my bishop to g2, and my opponent played d6? I thought that they would like their bishop on g7 as soon as possible, but okay. I played b3, with plans of moving my dark square bishop on b2, potentially challenging my opponent's own dark square bishop. My opponent played bishop g7, and I played bishop b2. In terms of stopping what my opponent wants, I think that I was successful-ish. I mean, I'm soon going to castle, and I kinda stopped my opponent's dark square bishop with my own dark square bishop, making their bishop less scary, so I think it's good. My opponent castled, and I played knight f3, which at the time I thought was reasonable, but after analyzing it, apparently Stockfish doesn't like it, saying that I should have played knight h3. I think that I was saying that my bishop on g2 is playing the very important role of protecting my pawn on d5, so the knight should just be tossed aside, like how she tossed me aside. Anyways, after I played knight f3, my opponent developed their other knight to d7, which was also considered an inaccuracy according to Stockfish. It's not that it was a bad move, but they could have capitalized on me blocking my bishop by moving their light square bishop to b7, attacking my pawn on d5, which I don't really have a good way of defending. I castled, and my opponent played queen b6, applying a bit of pressure on my queen side. I played rook e1, unpinning my e-pawn from their light square bishop, and planning on playing e4 in the future. My opponent played c4, probably thinking I was a lobotomite who would take on c4 losing my bishop. I played bishop d4, attacking my opponent's queen, and then taking their pawn right after. My opponent moved their queen to e5, and I took on c4. My opponent took back with their bishop, and I played bishop c3, attacking their queen again. My opponent took the pawn on d5 with their queen, and instead just took the queen. And my opponent took back with their knight. Doing what I planned to do very early on in the game, I took my opponent's dark square bishop on g7, giving me one less thing to worry about, and my opponent took back with their king. I moved my knight from f3 to d2, attacking their bishop on c4, while simultaneously attacking their knight on d5 with my bishop. My opponent took my pawn on a2. After all, it was their only move. But that was part of my plan. I took the bishop with my rook, and after my opponent took back with their rook, I took my opponent's line on d5. In the end, I had an exchange of a knight and a bishop for a rook and a pawn. My opponent moved their rook to b2, escaping its death from my bishop. I moved my knight to c4, chasing down their rook. They moved their rook to c2, and I finally developed my b1 knight to a3, adding extra protection to my knight on c4 and attacking their rook. My opponent moved their rook to c3, and I played knight b5. My opponent moved their rook back to c2, and I centralized my knight on d4. My opponent moved their rook to c3 again, and I moved my other knight to e3. My opponent played knight f6, with plans on sacrificing their rook, taking my knight on e3, and then taking my bishop on d5, with the result of me being down a pawn and ending up with isolated double pawns. Not wanting that to happen, I moved my bishop to f3, and my opponent played rook b8.
I played knight c6, forking my opponent's rook on b8 and their pawn on e7. My opponent moved the rook to b7, escaping danger and defending the e7 pawn at the same time. Wanting my rook to do something, I moved it to a1, and my opponent played rook c7, attacking my knight. I moved my rook to a6, both defending the knight and avoiding a trade of rooks. Usually, 2 pieces are better than a rook, but in an endgame, that's usually when the rooks shine. So basically, the less pieces there are, the worse it becomes for me. Probably. Anyways, my opponent played d5, cutting off my bishop from defending my knight on c6. I immediately moved it away to d4, and my opponent played rook c1 check, forcing me to go king g2. My opponent aggressively played e5, as I moved my knight to b5. My opponent attacked my knight, moving their c7 rook to c5, and I moved my knight to d6, with plans on attacking the f7 pawn. Then, they played e4. Now you might think, okay, no big deal, just move it to g4. But I forgot that my knight was defending g4, so I thought my bishop was just trapped, so I just gave it up, playing rook a7. Anyways, after I played rook a7, my opponent took my bishop. I took back with my king, and my opponent stopped my dreams by playing rook c7. It turns out, not everything goes your way. I played rook a5, attacking my opponent's pawn on d5, and then they played d4. I played knight d5, with the intent of attracting their knight to d5, leaving e8 undefended, allowing me to fork their king and their rook, only to realize that I would still end up a piece down. So after they moved their king away, I just took the knight back. Yeah. My opponent played rook c3, with the intent of going d3 pretty soon, and being the coward I am, I moved it back to g2. My opponent played rook c8, which was a mistake! I can now play knight d6, attacking their f7 pawn and their d4 pawn at the same time. My opponent moved their rook to c2, and I took on f7. My opponent was forced to move their king back to g7, and I played knight g5. My opponent took on e2, and I played rook d7 check, about to win another pawn, but instead of a pawn, I was gifted with something much greater. My opponent's stubborn ass moved their king to h6, and I played h4, trapping their king. They played king h5, hoping to escape to g4, but I blocked that path, playing king h3, which turned out to be the wrong move according to Stockfish. But my opponent resigned, so it doesn't matter.